Hello and welcome. I am Christopher John Björkness. It is June 23rd, 2022. The earliest Christian churches were communist secret societies where congregants met in private and engaged in orgies and other widely condemned activities. The earliest Christians had a very bad reputation in ancient society. They utilized cryptic symbols and spoke in coded language so that outsiders could not understand the real meaning or true intent of Christianity. Many people assume that this is because Christianity was outlawed, but it's the other way around. Christianity was outlawed because Christians were so widely hated and viewed as corrupting influences on society. Only initiated adepts were taught the hidden rites and occult beliefs of the Christian elite, which mirrored the mystery religions of the Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians. Christians were generally shunned because many people objected to their corrupt and corrupting practices. Orthodox Christian church fathers later pretended to have abandoned these practices in a successful effort to rehabilitate the image of Christians. But the fact that they maintained their exclusive hierarchy and cultish secrecy proves that they did not reform their ways behind the scenes. In his book, Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike sought to liken his communistic and Luciferian secret society to that of Christianity. And in so doing, he proved that the early Christian churches were mystery schools which imitated the practices and beliefs of the Orphic, Eleusinian, and Samothracian mystery religions. Jesus himself explained the deliberately esoteric nature of real Christianity in the Gospels and why it was kept hidden. I'll read to you the passages where Jesus explains why he spoke in parables. They wanted to keep society from realizing how dangerous Christianity was to society, and they wanted to prevent the Gentiles from saving themselves from Christianity and from obtaining salvation. The real meaning of salvation in this context was simply being able to survive Christianity and its efforts to destroy all the pagan religions and strip the Romans and other people of their indigenous religions and supernatural protection. Matthew chapter 13, verses 10 through 17 states, The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people have longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it." Jesus explains that to his disciples that he will reveal the true meaning of the parables to them, but not to the common people, as this was the regular practice of the secret societies of the age and the mystery religions. Only the adepts and the initiates were let in on the true meaning of what was being said and the true meaning of the symbols that were being employed. And the common people were regularly and always lied to about what those things actually represented and meant to the Christians themselves. Mark chapter 4, verses 10 through 12 states, "When he was alone, the 12 and the others around him asked him about the parables. He told them, 'The secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to those on the outside, everything is said in parables, so that they may be ever seeing but never perceiving, and ever hearing but never understanding. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven.'" So Jesus is making clear that his intent is to prevent the Romans and common people from understanding what it is that the Christians were up to, because what they were up to was the complete destruction of European peoples. Luke chapter 8, verses 9 and 10 says, "His disciples asked him what this parable meant. He said, 'The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to others I speak in parables, so that though seeing, they may not see, though hearing, they may not understand.'" Those are again references to the prophet Isaiah. Jesus railed against the scribes and Pharisees, and many people think that was because Jesus rejected their oral traditions, which later became the Midrash, the Talmud, and the Kabbalah, which were often written down later so that they not be forgotten when the Jews found themselves in the exile, and sought to preserve this oral tradition for all future generations. Jesus was not angry at the scribes and Pharisees for maintaining this oral tradition. Instead, he was angry at them for not utilizing it for the destruction of the European peoples. And he wanted to employ that knowledge for the betterment of his initiates and to employ it as a weapon of war against Rome and against the Europeans. And he was terribly angry at the scribes and Pharisees for not doing so themselves. This is clearly stated in Luke and the Gospel of Thomas. I'm only going to quote from Luke here, Luke chapter 11, verse 52. "Woe to you, experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering." This secret knowledge was the knowledge of the Roman, Greek, and Egyptian mystery schools, which taught adepts how to elevate their souls back to God, how to reunite the divine spark of their inner divine light with the one of the holy God that first emanated that light. Albert Pike sought to, very much like the early Christians, improve the reputation of his communistic secret society among general society by likening it to Christianity and pointing out the commonalities between Christianity and his secret society. He wrote in Morals and Dogma, beginning at page 540, "None can deny that Christ taught a lofty morality. Love one another, forgive those that despitefully use you and persecute you. Be pure of heart, meek, humble, contented. Lay not up riches on earth, but in heaven. Submit to the powers lawfully over you. Become like these little children, or ye cannot be saved. For of such is the kingdom of heaven. Forgive the repentant, and cast no stone at the sinner. If you too have sinned, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Such and not abstruse questions of theology were his simple and sublime teachings. And all of those teachings were meant to undermine Roman society, render them weak and submissive, and to turn them against their own family and against their own God, so that they would lose all of their supernatural protection. The Christians got rid of animal sacrifices and human sacrifices among the European societies, not so that those people would become stronger, but so that those people would become weaker and kill off their gods by abandoning their belief in their gods, and starve their gods to death by failing to provide their gods with the sacrificial animals that they relied upon for food. All of these mythologies were the commonly believed theology of the ancient peoples. Albert Pike continues, The early Christians followed in his footsteps. The first preachers of the faith had no thought of domination. They most certainly did. Entirely animated by his saying that he among them should be first, who should serve with the greatest devotion, they were humble, modest, and charitable, and they knew how to communicate this spirit of the inner man to the churches under their direction. These churches were at first but spontaneous meetings of all Christians inhabiting the same locality. A pure and severe morality, mingled with religious enthusiasm, was the characteristic of each and excited the admiration even of their persecutors. That's in fact not true. Most people realized how dangerous Christianity was to society and rejected it, condemned it, spoke out against it, repudiated it, and they banned it. Everything was in common among them, their property, their joys, and their sorrows. They were communists, and I'll read something from Alexandrian Christianity, selected translations of Clement and Origen to that effect. Clement and Origen pointed out that Carpocrates and his son Epiphanes were communistic. They held women in common, treated women like meat, like sex objects that could be passed around from between all the men. This was one of the reasons why society rejected the Christians, and why the Christians felt a need to reform their image in the eyes of the public. Well, in secret, they continued to carry on their degenerate practices behind closed doors in private meetings. In the silence of night, they met for instruction and to pray together. Their love feasts or fraternal repasts ended these reunions, in which all differences in social position and rank were effaced in the presence of a paternal deity. They were the original communists who inspired Karl Marx to the idea that personal property should be gotten rid of. It does not exist among animals, and therefore human beings should become like animals, share all their women amongst each other, and operate communally. And of course, all of these were subversive things which would destroy society, undermine morality, lead to the corruption and degradation of society. They also promoted, they enforced the idea that no children could be born to Christians, because they viewed the material world as an evil place and did not want to trap the divine spark of the Holy One in the corpse of flesh of the material world. So if Christians adhered to this practice, as the Cathars, Bogomils, and others later would, like the original Christians, all of European society would have disappeared due to this extermination agenda of Christianity, which was later picked up by Marxism. It's also terribly dysgenic when you allow the best women to breed with the worst men and the worst, most abusive, aggressive, psychopathic men to breed with as many women as they wish to and impregnate them. Their sole object was to make men better. Again, it wasn't to make them better, it was to be dysgenic and to exterminate them. By bringing them back to a simple worship of which universal morality was the basis, and to end those numerous and cruel sacrifices which everywhere inundated with blood the altars of the gods. This was not done out of morality. Jesus Christ himself offered himself up as a human sacrifice, so they obviously did not view sacrifices as immoral. Instead, their objective was to prevent the pagans from offering sacrifices to their gods in an attempt to kill off those gods by starving them of their worship and of their food from their human source. And once they had killed off those pagan gods who provided supernatural protection to the Romans and Europeans, the Romans and Europeans would die off below as their gods had died off due to a lack of worship above. Thus did Christianity reform the world and obey the teachings of its founder. It gave to woman her proper rank and influence. It regulated domestic life, and by admitting the slaves to the love feasts, it by degrees raised them above that oppression under which half of mankind had groaned for ages. In fact, Christianity sought to eliminate the genders and combine them as androgynes. And in the Gnostic writings, such as the Apocryphon of John, it states that Jesus sought to turn women into men. And that was how they were liberating women, is by destroying their femininity, depriving them of their unique gender, and converting them into androgynes. The Christians believed that all the gods were androgynous and sought to make humanity mimic their gods, and the archons and aeons, who were all androgynous, by depriving humanity of their natural normal genders and instead insisting that they become androgynous. In the early days of Christianity, there was an initiation like those of the pagans. Persons were admitted on special conditions only. To arrive at a complete knowledge of the doctrine, they had to pass 3 degrees of instruction. Pike himself was initiated into the 33rd degree. The initiates were consequently divided into 3 classes. The first, the auditors; the second, the catechumens; and the third, the faithful. The auditors were a sort of novices who were prepared by certain ceremonies and certain instruction to receive the dogmas of Christianity. A portion of these dogmas was made known to the catechumens, after who particular purifications received baptism or the initiation of the theogenesis, divine generation. But in the grand mysteries of that religion, the incarnation, nativity, passion, and resurrection of Christ, none were initiated but the faithful. These were common rites in the mystery religions, which were meant to enable the soul to rise out of the body and reunite with the gods in an ecstatic, mystical reunion with the One. These doctrines and the celebration of the holy sacraments, particularly the Eucharist, were kept with profound secrecy. These mysteries were divided into 2 parts. The first styled the Mass of the catechumens, the second the Mass of the faithful. The celebration of the mysteries of Mithras was also styled a Mass, and the ceremonies used were the same. So you can see that Christians simply copied what they had learned from the pagans and what they believed would allow them to escape the material realm and enter the divine realm. There were found all the sacraments of the Catholic Church, even the breath of confirmation. The priest of Mithras promised the initiates deliverance from sin by means, I should read, again, Christianity was the prototype for Marxism and the idea of socialists and communists that no person should own personal property, and the idea of Marx in the Communist Manifesto that women should become common property and that marriage should be abandoned and that any man should have the right to force himself upon any woman he chose as common property of the state. Quoting from Alexandrian Christianity, selected translations of Clement and Origen, Clement gives here substantial quotations from a book attributed to Carpocrates' son, Epiphanes, entitled Concerning Righteousness. This work merely consists of the scribblings of an intelligent but nasty-minded adolescent of somewhat pornographic tendencies. That was the early Christians. The work attempts to justify extreme sexual license by a communistic theory. The existence of private property is of human invention and has no divine sanction. Communism is therefore to be practiced in sexual relationships. And that's exactly what Marx said in the Communist Manifesto of 1848. Of confession and baptism and a future life of happiness or misery. He celebrated the oblation of bread, image of the resurrection, the baptism of newly born children, extreme unction, confession of sins, all belong to the Mithraic rites. The candidate was purified by a species of baptism. A mark was impressed upon his forehead. He offered bread and water, pronouncing certain mysterious words. Mithraism was part of the Greek and Roman mystery schools and mystery religions. It is derived from Persian dualism. There is a cacodemon who is an evil god who is worshipped so that he does no harm to the people. This cacodemon is named Armanius. He is wrapped in a snake, which represents chaos. He is the source of the dark light of night, which illuminates the moon. And again, he is given sacrifices so that he does no harm to the community, but instead joins with the community in destroying its enemies. This cacodemon, Armanius, was given the form of Yaldabaoth, who is the God of Israel, Yahweh, in Christianity. And you can see symbols of Yaldabaoth greatly resemble Armanius. They have the head of a lion and the body of the snake, just as Armanius has the head of a lion and has a snake coiled about him. During the persecutions in the early ages of Christianity, the Christians took refuge in the vast catacombs which stretched for miles in every direction under the city of Rome, and are supposed to have been of Etruscan origin. There, amid labyrinthine windings, deep caverns, hidden chambers, chapels, and tombs, the persecuted fugitives found refuge, and there they performed the ceremonies of the mysteries. The Basilidians, a sect of Christians that arose soon after the time of the apostles, practiced the mysteries with the old Egyptian legend. They symbolized Osiris by the sun, Isis by the moon, and Typhon by Scorpio, and wore crystals bearing these emblems as amulets or talismans to protect them from danger, upon which were also a brilliant star and the serpent. They were copied from the talismans of Persia and Arabia, and given to every candidate at his initiation. Irenaeus tells us that the Simonians, one of the earliest sects of the Gnostics, had a priesthood of the mysteries. Tertullian tells us that the Valentinians, the most celebrated of all the Gnostic schools, initiated, or rather perverted, the mysteries of Eleusis. That's the Eleusinian mysteries, which were highly complex, had a great many rites which the Christians copied. Irenaeus informs us in several curious chapters of the mysteries practiced by the Marcosians. And Origen gives much information as to the mysteries of the Ophites. And there is no doubt that all the Gnostic sects had mysteries and an initiation. They all claimed to possess a secret doctrine, coming to them directly from Jesus Christ. It actually came to them. Jesus Christ never existed. It came to them from the Orphic, Eleusinian, and Samothracian mysteries that they copied, which were closely related to Platonism. Platonism was introduced into Judaism most heavily by the Septuagint, and then by Philo of Alexandria, who was a Middle Platonist. The later Neoplatonists held much in common with the Gnostics, but again, they criticized the Gnostics for their degenerate practices and for the fact that they claimed that the creator god, the demiurge, was an evil being, Yaldabaoth, who is equivalent to the Mithraic god Ahrimanus. Different from that of the Gospels and the Epistles, and superior to those communications, which in their eyes were merely exoteric. That means that they were, when they spoke to outsiders, they lied to them about what their symbols and doctrines actually meant and were, and what their intentions actually were, which was to destroy the Romans and destroy Europeans in general. This secret doctrine they did not communicate to everyone, and among the extensive sect of the Basilidians, hardly 1 in 1,000 knew it, as we learn from Irenaeus. We know the name of only the highest class of their initiates. They were styled elect, or elus, and strangers to the world. They had at least 3 degrees: the material, the intellectual, and the spiritual. That relates to wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, which wisdom is the material world. It is chaos. The intellect is knowledge, and the spiritual is the soul. And the lesser and greater mysteries, and the number of those who attained the highest degree was small. Baptism was one of their most important ceremonies, and the Basilidians celebrated the 10th of January as the anniversary of the day on which Christ was baptized in Jordan. They had the ceremony of laying on of hands by way of purification, and that of the mystic banquet, emblem of that to which they believed the heavenly wisdom would one day admit them in the fullness of things. The heavenly banquet is a feast at the end of the 6,000 years of the 6 days of creation, at the commencement of the 7th millennium and the Messianic era. At this banquet, the Leviathan and the Behemoth are eaten, and wine which has been stored in kegs from the beginning of time is drunken. The Leviathan that will be eaten is Christ, which is what the Eucharist in one sense symbolizes. He is the bread and the wine of the tree of knowledge, which will have become ripe at the end of the 6 days of creation and will then be kosher to be consumed by the Jewish people. Their ceremonies were much more like those of the Christians than those of Greece, but they mingled with them much that was borrowed from the Orient and Egypt, and taught the primitive truths mixed with a multitude of fantastic errors and fictions. The discipline of the secret was the concealment, occultatio, of certain tenets and ceremonies. So says Clemens of Alexandria. To avoid persecution, the early Christians were compelled to use great precaution and to hold meetings of the faithful, of the household of faith, in private places under concealment by darkness. They assembled in the night, and they guarded against the intrusion of false brethren and profane persons, spies who might cause their arrest. They conversed together figuratively and by the use of symbols, lest Cohens and eavesdroppers might overhear. And there existed among them a favored class or order who were initiated into certain mysteries which they were bound by solemn promise not to disclose or even converse about, except with such as had received them under the same sanction. They were called brethren, the faithful, stewards of the mysteries, superintendents, devotees of the secrets, and architects. We can learn much about what it was they actually believed and the rites and rituals they performed by studying the Neoplatonists and the Kabbalists. In the Hierarchia attributed to Saint Dionysius, the Areopagite, and the first bishop of Athens, the tradition of the sacrament is said to have been divided into 3 degrees or grades: purification, initiation, and accomplishment or perfection. And it mentions also, as part of the ceremony, the bringing to sight. The apostolic constitutions attributed to Clemens, Bishop of Rome, describe the early church and say, these regulations must on no account be communicated to all sorts of persons because of the mysteries contained in them. They speak of the deacon's duty to keep the doors, that none uninitiated should enter at the oblation, and also by private signal in times of persecution, gave notice to those within to enable them to avoid danger. The mysteries were open to the fideles, or faithful only, and no spectators were allowed at the communion. Why were they doing these things in private and in secret? Why wouldn't they make known this good news, the Gospels? Instead, they did all of these things and kept them hidden. They were ashamed of them. They did not want people to know about them. What were they up to? In fact, we know what they were up to from the Gospel of Judas, the Apocalypse of Abraham, and the many prophecies of the Septuagint, which stated that this figure Christ would return as the Antichrist and destroy all non-Israelites. Tertullian, who died about AD 216, says in his Apology, "None are admitted to the religious mysteries without an oath of secrecy. We appeal to your Thracian and Eleusinian mysteries, and we are especially bound to this caution, because if we prove faithless, we should not only provoke heaven, but draw upon our heads the utmost rigor of human displeasure. And should strangers betray us, they know nothing but by report and hearsay. Far hence, ye profane, is the prohibition from all holy mysteries." The Gentiles were not allowed to know those secrets which would actually lead to salvation. And the fact that the salvation of the Israelites was to be brought about through Christians and the destruction of paganism and the destruction of the European peoples. It was not the salvation of the Christian masses which was sought. It was the salvation of the Israelites through the destruction of the Christian masses. And this was the great secret that the church fathers and early Christians kept from the uninitiated for obvious reasons. Clemens, Bishop of Alexandria, born about AD 191, says in his Stromata that he cannot explain the mysteries, because he should thereby, according to the old proverb, put a sword into the hands of a child. He frequently compares the discipline of the secret with the heathen mysteries as to their internal and recondite wisdom. I think part of this mysteriousness, just as in modern secret societies, is to create a mystique and an allure that those who become initiates will obtain supernatural powers and ever elevate their souls to a mystical reunion with the gods. But the real reason that they kept these things secret was not because they feared that this great power of the divine will would enter the common masses and become destructive to all of humanity. It was instead they wanted to keep hidden their ill intent against the European peoples and against the gods of the European peoples, and the fact that they believed that if they were to kill off those gods, they would likewise kill off those who believed in those gods. Excuse me. Whenever the early Christians happened to be in the company with strangers, more properly termed the profane, they never spoke of their sacraments, but indicated to one another what they meant by means of symbols and secret watchwords, disguisedly and as by direct communication of mind with mind, and by enigmas. In other words, they were cryptic, deceptive, they were a bunch of liars, they were out to deceive the people and keep what they were doing hidden and private, because they had ill intent against the common man, just as the Marxists had ill intent against the common man. They did not want a dictatorship of the proletariat. They wanted an autocratic, authoritarian dictatorship of an elite class, complete stratification of society, and the greatest possible wealth disparity imaginable by placing all property in the hands of a very few and not allowing the common masses to own property at all. Origen, born AD 134 or 135, answering Celsus, who had objected that the Christians had a concealed doctrine, said, "Inasmuch as the essential and important doctrines and principles of Christianity are openly taught, it is foolish to object that there are other things that are recondite, secret and private." Hidden, actually. For this is common to Christian discipline, with that of those philosophers in whose teaching some things were exoteric and some things esoteric. Exoteric meaning available to outsiders, esoteric meaning only understood by adepts and initiates. And it is enough to say that it was so with some of the disciples of Pythagoras. It's certainly so of the disciples of Pythagoras. They were taught to maintain silence and to keep all of their secrets carefully guarded, because they too sought an advantage over the common man. The formula which the primitive church pronounced at the moment of celebrating its mysteries was this: "Depart ye profane, let the catechumens and those who have not been admitted or initiated go forth." They viewed themselves as divine, and common people as material corruption, as dung, as the dung heap of the material world. Archelaus, and they did not want to redeem those people or save them. They instead wanted to control them and remove what little supernatural protection they had through their own indigenous gods. They did not allow them to understand the secret doctrines that the Christians maintained, and the Christians destroyed all the temples and secret societies of the mystery religions and eliminated all of the competition that the highest elite of Christians maintained by adopting all of those secret beliefs and keeping them from themselves while destroying them among the European peoples. Archelaus, bishop of Cascara in Mesopotamia, who in the year 278 conducted a controversy with the Manichaeans, said, "These mysteries the Church now communicates to him who has passed through the introductory degree. They are not explained to the Gentiles at all." That's a key phrase to understand. Why would that be unless their intent was to harm the Gentiles? "Nor are they taught openly in the hearing of catechumens, but much that is spoken is in disguised terms, that the faithful who possess the knowledge may be still more informed, and those who are not acquainted with it may suffer no disadvantage." Again, the Christians were terrible liars. They lied about everything. And whenever they would say that they meant no harm to people, they were just deliberately lying. The way that Christ admitted that his parables were lies to the common public and required explication to his disciples in order to be properly understood. Christians were the most deceitful people in the world. Cyril, bishop of Jerusalem, was born in the year 315 and died in 386. In his catechesis, he says, "The Lord spake in parables to his hearers in general, but to his disciples he explained in private the parables and allegories which he spoke in public. The splendor of glory is for those who are early enlightened. Obscurity and darkness are the portion of the unbelievers and ignorant." The ignorant were those 999 out of the 1,000 who were not initiate adepts and allowed to understand what it was that was being spoken in this coded cryptic form, and how the common people were lied to about the true intent and what was actually signified in these parables, which was the destruction of the non-Israelites. The splendor of glory is for those who are early enlightened. Obscurity and darkness are the portion of the unbelievers and ignorant. Just so the Church discovers its mysteries to those who have advanced beyond the class of catechumens. We employ obscure terms with others. This was again later taken up by the secret society of which Albert Pike was a member, and he said that it was legitimate to lie about the true nature of the symbols of his secret society and the beliefs of his secret society. And again, he utilized the pretext that it would be dangerous if the masses came to understand these things. But it would be dangerous to the leaders of the secret society because the masses would realize that they were under attack. Saint Basil, the great bishop of Caesarea, born in the year 326 and dying in the year 376, says, "We receive the dogmas transmitted to us by writing, and those which have descended to us from the apostles beneath the mystery of oral tradition." It's important to understand that that oral tradition is what Jesus was talking about when he was angry with the scribes and Pharisees, the experts in the law, for not making use of those oral traditions for the destruction of non-Israelites and the salvation of the Jewish people. And Jesus set about to rectify that situation by utilizing this mystery knowledge which the Judaizers obtained from the Greek mystery religions in order to turn it against the Greeks and the Europeans themselves and commandeer this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding and utilize it as a weapon of war with which to destroy the very people whose ancestors had generated it. For several things have been handed to us without writing, lest the vulgar, too familiar with our dogmas, should lose a due respect for them. This is what they always blame the people that they're hiding these from for the fact that they're hiding it from them. They never admit that they are deceivers and liars, and that they had an obligation, if they were moral people, to reveal their true beliefs and true intent. And instead, they demeaned and degraded those to whom they lied and blamed those to whom they lied for the fact that they themselves were liars. This is what the uninitiated are not permitted to contemplate. And how should it ever be proper to write and circulate among the people an account of them? Saint Gregory Nazianzen, Bishop of Constantinople, A.D. 379, says, "You have heard as much of the mystery as we are allowed to speak openly in the ears of all. The rest will be communicated to you in private, and that you must retain within yourself. Our mysteries are not to be made known to strangers." Saint Ambrose, Archbishop of Milan, who was born in 340 and died in 393, says in his work, De Mysteris, "All the mysteries should be kept concealed, guarded by faithful silence, lest it should be inconsiderately divulged to the ears of the profane. It is not given to all to contemplate the depths of our mysteries, that they may not be seen by those who ought not to behold them, nor received by those who cannot preserve them." Pike said very similar things to his, in regards to his own secret society. He was obviously mimicking the Christians in many respects. And they, in turn, were mimicking the Greek mystery schools. And in another work, he sins against God who divulges to the unworthy the mysteries confided to him. The danger is not merely in violating truth, but in telling truth, if he allow himself to give hints of them to those from whom they ought to be concealed. Beware of casting pearls before swine. Every mystery ought to be kept secret, and, as it were, to be covered over by silence. Again, this all goes back to the Pythagoreans. Pythagoras was inspired by an Egyptian priest. The Egyptian priests also kept their beliefs silent. Pythagoras said that everything should be done in silence, lest it should rashly be divulged to the ears of the profane. Take heed that you do not incautiously reveal the mysteries. St. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo, who was born in 347 and died in 430, says in one of his discourses, "Having dismissed the catechumens, we have retained you only to be our hearers, because besides those things which belong to all Christians in common, we are now to discourse to you of sublime mysteries, which none are qualified to hear but those who, by the Master's favor, are made partakers of them. To have taught them openly would have been to betray them." And he refers to the Ark of the Covenant and says that it signified a mystery or secret of God, shadowed over by the cherubim of glory and honored by being veiled. So they really didn't want to save the souls of the common Christians, did they? They instead wanted to lie to them and keep hidden their agenda, their intent, and their true beliefs, which obviously didn't favor the common man because they had this great disrespect and intense hatred for the common man. Saint Chrysostom and Saint Augustine speak of initiation more than 50 times. Saint Ambrose writes to those who are initiated, and initiation was not merely baptism or admission into the church, but it referred to initiation into the mysteries. To the baptized and initiated, the mysteries of religion were unveiled. They were kept secret from the catechumens, who were permitted to hear the scriptures read and the ordinary discourses delivered, in which the mysteries reserved for the faithful were never treated of. When the services and prayers were ended, the catechumens and spectators all withdrew. That means that the Gospels don't reveal what Christianity is all about. And even when they speak about what true Christianity is, they speak of it in code which needs to be deciphered by adepts to the uninitiated in order for the initiated to understand. So if you read the Gospels as a Christian without having someone there who is knowledgeable enough to decode and decipher it for you, as I do in my books, which you can find at my website, cjbbooks.com, you have no hope of obtaining salvation, and you have no hope whatsoever of understanding what Christianity is really all about, because Christianity is really all about stealing your soul and giving it to the Israelites. Chrysostom, Bishop of Constantinople, was born in 354 and died in 417. He says, "I wish to speak openly, but I dare not, on account of those who are not initiated. I shall therefore avail myself of disguised terms, discoursing in a shadowy manner. Where the holy mysteries are celebrated, we drive away all uninitiated persons, and then close the doors." He mentions the acclamations of the initiated, which, he says, "I here pass over in silence, for it is forbidden to disclose such things to the profane." Palladius, in his life of Chrysostom, records as a great outrage that a tumult having been excited among his enemies, they forced their way into the penetralia, where the uninitiated beheld what was not proper for them to see. And Chrysostom mentions the same circumstance in his epistle to Pope Innocent. Seems the Pope wasn't too innocent, was he? He was quite guilty of betraying all those to whom he had a fiduciary responsibility. Saint Cyril of Alexandria, who was made bishop in 412 and died in 444, said in his 7th book against Julian, These mysteries are so profound and so exalted that they can be comprehended by those only who are enlightened. I shall not, therefore, attempt to speak of what is so admirable in them, lest by discovering them to the uninitiated, I should offend against the injunction not to give what is holy to the impure, nor cast pearls before such as cannot estimate their worth. That's a reference referring to European common Christians as pigs. Don't cast your pearls before swine. I should say much more if I were not afraid of being heard by those who are uninitiated, because men are apt to deride what they do not understand, and the ignorant, not being aware of the weakness of their minds, condemn what they ought most to venerate. They clearly hated their congregations. They hated humanity in general. They viewed themselves as an enlightened elite who had the divine will within them as their own will, and they believed psychopathically that entitled them to lie to and betray all those who trusted in them. Theodoret, bishop of Syropolis in Syria, was born in 393 and made bishop in 420. In one of his 3 dialogues, called The Immutable, he introduces orthodoxus, speaking thus: "Answer me, if you please, in mystical or obscure terms, for perhaps there are some persons present who are not initiated into the mysteries." And in his preface to Ezekiel, tracing up the secret discipline to the commencement of the Christian era, he says, "These mysteries are so august that we ought to keep them with the greatest caution." Minucius Felix, an eminent lawyer of Rome who lived in 212 and wrote a defense of Christianity, says, "Many of them, the Christians, know each other by tokens and signs, notis et insignibus, and they form a friendship for each other almost before they become acquainted." The Latin word tessera originally meant a square piece of wood or stone used in making tessellated pavements, afterward a tablet on which anything was written, and then a cube or die. Its most general use was to designate a piece of metal or wood, square in shape, on which the watchword of an army was inscribed. Whence tessera came to mean the watchword itself. There was also a tessera hospitalis, which was a piece of wood cut into 2 parts as a pledge of friendship. Each party kept one of the parts, and they swore mutual fidelity by Jupiter. To break the tessera was considered a dissolution of the friendship. The early Christians used it as a mark, the watchword of friendship. With them, it was generally in the shape of a fish and made of bone. On its face was inscribed the word of fish, the initials of which represented the Greek words, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Savior. Saint Augustine, De Fide et Symbolis, says, "This is the faith which in a few words is given to the novices to be kept by a symbol. These few words are known to all the faithful, that by believing they may be submissive to God. By being thus submissive, they may live rightly. By living rightly, they may purify their hearts, and with a pure heart may understand what they believe." They don't seem to have very pure hearts to me. They instead seem to be arrogant, hateful, deceitful people who viewed themselves as superior to the common man and out to destroy the common man and out to remove every defense the common man had prior to being seduced into becoming Christians. Maximus Taurinus says, the tessera is a symbol and sign by which to distinguish between the faithful and the profane. The secret society of Albert Pike, as well as is well known, uses secret symbols and secret handshakes and secret signs to one another, which mimic this practice of the tessera. I hope this has enlightened people to the truth about how Christianity began and the fact that it took the majority of its beliefs from the Greek, Roman, and Egyptian mystery religions. It mimicked their rites and practices in order to appeal to the greatest intellectuals of the age to become initiates and adepts and form an evil secret society that was determined to destroy Europe and capture the souls of the Christian masses and utilize that soul energy and transfer it to the Israelites who had been unjustly expelled from their holy land so that they could gain the soul energy that they would need on the seventh day to enter the Messianic era. You can learn what it is that Jesus and the early Christians were hiding from their own believers and from the world in general in my books, which you can find at my website, cjbbooks.com. Beware of the World to Come thoroughly explains what the leaders of Christianity anticipate to happen after they destroy the world, after Jesus Christ returns as the Antichrist and wipes out humanity. Rise Above the Gods Who Hate Us. In this book, I delve deeply into the Neoplatonic and Platonic Hellenistic roots of Christianity and the Orphic religions which inspired Christianity. And in my book series, Satanic Secrets of Jesus Christ, I reveal all the secrets that the early church fathers kept hidden from the world. Please, there is a link in the description below that will take you directly to my website. And there is also a link for my PayPal donation page. Please make a contribution so that I can make more of these videos and enlighten you as to the true nature of Christianity and the mystery religions and secret societies. Thank you so very much for watching. I will see you next time.